Labor Day is upon us and September is here. The final playoff push has begun. And what might matter more than anything is this week's stat of the week, which is range factor for your defensive players. And speaking of people that, might be out there having a surprising season and our under the radar story of the week, we're going to might take a look at a closer that you might not be thinking about for the Hall of Fame. It's This Week in Baseball. And so here we are, it is September, and I think as a baseball fan, there is only one thing on your mind this season. Well, two. Either golf or baseball. Because either your team's in it or your team's out of it at this point.
It's interesting that the season ends this year on September 28th, the regular season. And we've been leaking into October, October 1st or 2nd or something like that for the final games of the season. So they stopped it a little sooner. Now, that doesn't mean the World Series isn't going to end in November, because it is. But there's only about 25 or so, 26 games for each team in September. So maybe a little bit fewer from this point forward as it might have been in the past.
Which means there's less room to move around at this point. You're not going to be able to catch up nearly as much space here. And if you're a team that's on a downswing right now, it's a bad time to be on the downswing. Looking at you, Cincinnati Reds, who are 2-8 in their last 10.
Right. And the National League, the races, the Phillies who were up 6 games last weekend, they're still up 6 games. No change there.
Right.
The Padres are gaining a little on the Dodgers. They're only 1 game out. They were 2 last week. The Brewers are still light years sort of ahead of the Cubs. And so the playoff positions in the National League are pretty well set, with really the Reds, as you pointed out, trying to chase down the Mets, who have the 3rd wild card right now, and any other team that might be able to somehow have that September to remember in the National League and catch one of those 2 teams.
Right. That's kind of the thing. The National League feels a little bit more set in place because it requires kind of 2 things to happen. You both need a team to absolutely go off in September, and you need one of the wild card teams above them to at least play not their best baseball. They don't necessarily need to be bad. It's not that big a lead, but unless you're putting some goofy record together that we really can't expect teams to do, if we're assuming 24 games, those teams are out there going 20-4 in this stretch, which is hard to believe in a lot of cases.
Well, you can't expect it. It can't happen.
It can't happen. But if you're not having that kind of thing, it's going to be hard to catch one of these teams in front of you, because that would require the Mets or the Padres playing bad for September, which can happen too.
And the bigger the lead, as is obviously like the Phillies would have to have a really bad September, and the Mets a really good one for them to even get close to making up 6 games in 25 games.
Right, it's not easy. And that's
same thing with the Cubs on the Brewers. So, can the Padres get ahead of the Dodgers? They're only a game behind as we start playing Sunday. Yeah, that could happen. I don't think that would be a shock, but I think people would be surprised if they did it.
In the same way that the Mets to lose their to catch up against the Phillies and make up that 6-game lead. Unfortunately for Cincinnati, you're looking at a 5-game lead. It's pretty much the same. You're going to have to play really well, and the Mets are going to have to kind of stumble if you're going to catch that.
Oh, Met fans.
And it is. And as a Met fan, it is in their DNA.
Like if the thing's going to happen in the National League, it's going to be the Mets are going to crash and burn in September, and the Reds will get that last spot.
I can so see it happening.
Whereas in the American League, the Yankees have closed to within a couple of games of the
They're
Blue
ahead
Jays.
of the Red Sox right now.
Quietly. The Red Sox have the wild card position. The Mariners, so solidly, those are the playoff teams right now if we were to stop play today. With the Royals trying to run down the Mariners.
Right. And don't look now.
And the Mariners trying to catch the Astros still.
Don't look now. The Texas Rangers have come climbing back into things. They're 70-67. They're only 2 games back of the Mariners.
Okay, so all season long, you've been giving it to me because I picked the Rangers. And here's the thing. I'm predicting the Rangers are dead. The Rangers are dead now because Seager's out for the year. He had appendicitis, and I thought losing a guy like that, Eovaldi's out for the year.
Right.
No, it's not happening.
Even though they've been actually playing some of the best baseball in baseball.
Nope, not happening. I don't think it'll come from them.
Right, but they're back in the race.
They're in the race.
Right.
So are the Royals.
Right. So the American League is a little more interesting because neither the Red Sox nor the Yankees have such a big lead over the Mariners.
Right.
That they couldn't be the teams to stumble because we've seen both of those teams have periods of play this year that are decidedly not good.
And obviously
Same with the Mets.
we're not Yankee fans, but the Yankees will make the playoffs so they can excruciatingly lose a series
right.
after that.
I think Yankee fans out there are thrilled by the idea of watching this defense play another playoff series.
Yeah.
Anthony Volpe might give people heart attacks in New York City if they have him out there for another.
And you're going to put Max Fried out there, who's been their best pitcher this year, even though I don't think he's had a Max Fried-like year.
Honestly, they're really glad he's going to win the American League Gold Glove because he might be their best defensive player.
Under siege out there. So, yeah, and if you put Rodon out there or a Will Warren or Heel, you just got to be nervous if you're a Yankee fan.
I think the Yankees, though, they're the type of team that, depending on who they match up against, could actually win a series because that lineup could just maul a team.
They can hit home runs,
right?
Can't
they can hit a lot of home runs, and they have a lot of proven guys that have playoff experience. And if you don't find ways to score runs early, they're going to hit a zillion solo shots against you, and those are at a premium in the playoffs. Winning a game 4-2 with 4 solo home runs is the Yankee way this year.
I wanted to talk about the fact that everybody gets on the A's, obviously, from the crazy Fisher stuff and Vegas stuff, but they have not only broken ground in Vegas, they are like building a stadium. So everybody that thinks that this isn't going to happen now, and I was one of them who said, I don't know if that's ever going to happen in Vegas. They're going to have a stadium there, and the A's are probably going to be pretty good when they move into that stadium.
I think here's the problem. I think for a lot of people, it wasn't necessarily the idea that they were going to literally be able to physically move to Vegas. I don't think Vegas is eager to adapt them as their team.
Well, when you're a team in Vegas in the first place, the Golden Knights, when they started, it shocked me, that they won the Stanley Cup, in their first year, but that everybody wanted to go to hockey games in Las Vegas.
Right.
Okay, so you got a very transient population. You got a lot of, but they managed to work. So I think the baseball thing is going to work.
One of the big things is the Las Vegas Knights got a lot of local support, too, from the people that actually lived in Vegas.
You don't think it's going to happen in baseball?
Because that was their team. This is some other team that's moving it. I don't think they're going to get embraced in the same way, especially with all of the stuff. Like, are you going to be excited if you're in Vegas about this athletics team coming in and moving in to play baseball? Are you going to want to go to games?
Fans will sell out. They will. They just do. They just
sure
do.
The novelty, the best thing that the Athletics could do is be good when they show up, because that's helped the Knights probably more than anything. Because if you're bad for a bunch of years, you're going to turn into a team that people only come to watch because they're there to see the other team.
It's going to be such an exclusive thing to do 81 times, by the way, to go to an A's game in Vegas. But I think the stadium isn't going to seat 40,000. It's in the 30s or something like that. A little easier to sell out 37,000 seats than it is 40. Exactly. So but for all those that said it's never going to happen, the A's are having, a weird season in a weird ballpark, in a weird circumstance where they're going to be another couple of years. But I kind of like that team. I've said it all season. They got some guys you want to watch.
They've got a lot of exciting young offensive
Kurtz
players.
And Langoliers, and
I think that the pitchers have now seen what it means going to that ballpark.
They don't want to pitch it in. It's like going to Colorado. You don't really want to be a pitcher there.
Right. So pitchers were already skeptical about signing there last offseason. Do you think anybody is going to agree to a contract to come pitch for them this offseason?
A ground ball pitcher?
It's like yes, come to Oakland and come to Sacramento and watch your stats get nuked. You can't take a short-term deal and try and prove anything there. You're going to look terrible for the most part.
One of those A's I mentioned, Nick Kurtz, who is now the favorite for Rookie of the Year, whereas Jacob Wilson, his teammate, started the season and probably had that for the longest time, but I don't think that's going to happen now.
Mm-hmm.
He was joined in the first grouping of 3 players to hit 4 home runs in a game in the major leagues in one season. Eugenio Suarez did that earlier this year, and Kyle Schwarber did it this week.
Right, he had a chance at 5, and he just didn't get the 5th.
And the 5th, the last at bat, it was against a position player. And so they had some stat about Kyle Schwarber against position players in his career. He's batting like 227 with no homers. Like, he can't hit the position players.
I'm kind of glad he didn't get a 5th home run off of a position player.
I agree.
That would have felt weird that that's how it happens.
It reminded me, and I put it in the notes going, sometime we probably should just talk about this sort of move to position players pitching more and more and more. And we understand why it happens, because managers are afraid to exhaust their bullpen any more than they already are. Should baseball, this would be the topic, should baseball legislate about how much you can use a position player to pitch in a game?
No.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about
We'll
that.
talk about
We'll
it.
talk about that. So, the Phillies, who have some relief pitching problems of their own, outright released Jordan Romano, and I just thought when they got him, this was the guy who was going to be the back end of their bullpen.
I don't think they were thinking that way. Because he had a terrible year the year before.
We can fix him,
right? They were thinking we can fix him, and they were like, "Oh, we cannot fix him. He's just bad." And I think the Phillies were probably encouraged that after their real rock star in the bullpen and John Duran had a bizarre game against the Mets earlier this week, came back against the Braves the other night and looked unhittable.
Looked lights out because they have Alvarado back from his 80-game suspension, but he can't pitch in the playoffs.
Right, and that's right. And so you've got Duran, which you've got to feel good about, but the Phillies are thinking like, okay, we're not going to have Zach Wheeler back. We're going to have to get to him. Yeah, that's a little concerning.
Yeah, well, I said last week, I think the rest of the pitchers will pick up the slack for the Phillies. I don't even think they have as much to worry about. And
the playoffs in the major leagues might as well be decided by whose bullpen gets hot in the playoffs.
Well, and our Mets have, brought up two of the kids now. And Nolan McClean had one of the best 3 starts to a career of any pitcher in Mets history, certainly not beyond Major League history. And Jonah Tong made his debut the other night. Maybe didn't look quite as good as did McClean. It wasn't bad.
It was a weird game. The Mets put up a ton of runs in the first 2 innings. They were incredibly long innings. It was just a bizarre game. So he didn't seem like he had his control or necessarily his best stuff.
Right.
But despite that, it wasn't like the Marlins were making great contact.
No, and he got through 5 innings, and the other guy, Brandon Sproat, who was supposed to be here, had a rough start his last one, but before the one he had on Saturday night where he went 7 scoreless. So I could see him pitching for the Mets in September. And wouldn't that be amazing if, all the other, the guys that they thought were going to be their pitchers don't pitch, and these kids come up.
And it's the kids that are giving you innings.
And was that David Stearns' master plan all the time?
Absolutely not.
So, no, I don't think so either. Like, well, wait till September and we'll unleash these guys on everybody. Yeah, I'm not thinking so.
But, in terms of pitching greatness, I think now, Paul Skenes has now had 50 major league starts. He has a career 2.02 ERA, and at the end of this season, he's going to be getting his first Cy Young.
Yeah, and it's going to be a walk. He's going to win in a walk because Wheeler's out for the year, as you said.
He was the only guy.
There really is nobody else in the National League.
And I think if you're Paul Skenes, you got to be thinking long and hard about if you're going to be signing a contract extension to stay in Pittsburgh.
Boy, there's something, how romantic I am about, and thanks to my buddies at Romantic about baseball, because I'm romantic about the idea that you play your whole career for one team. And if Skenes were to do that, they'd probably build a statue of this guy in Pittsburgh, even though it might not be a championship statue.
Right. It probably wouldn't be. And if you're Paul Skenes, you're like, you got to think about how much greater of a pitcher you have to be spending your whole career in Pittsburgh to make the Hall of Fame than if you went to, I will say this, a competent baseball franchise.
Well, it's not like they haven't had great pitchers in Pittsburgh, period.
Right. But think about how much better he has to be relative to his peers to make the Hall of Fame if he's going to spend his whole career in Pittsburgh. You're not going to get any postseason starts. You're definitely not going to get a World Series based on the last 40 years of history. I'm talking trash here as a Met fan, but the Met fans have at least been there recently.
Yeah,
they've competed for a World Series.
1979 for Pirates fans is a long time ago.
Right. And it's not like they've been good in a lot of
injuries. The last playoff was 2015.
Right.
It was the last time they got in. I think they lost in the wild card series game.
They're heading towards, I dare say it, Jets territory with their inability to make.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
That's a curse I don't want to put on any.
That nightmare begins next week.
I think it's just interesting with Skenes that that is going to be something that's going to be weighing on him, and I think Pittsburgh would be right to lock him up, because if you somehow let him go, I think that can only signal how unserious of a baseball franchise.
So you trade him for assets, right? So you're going to get a bunch of draft picks and all that because you're looking for a Paul Skenes.
Right.
But you have him already.
It could be anything. They could even be Paul Skenes.
There was a new award announced last week by the Baseball Writers Association, and it's interesting because I didn't realize that they only have now 5 awards that the BBWA puts out. I guess I thought you never know who's doing what when it comes to that kind of stuff.
They thankfully stripped them of most of that power.
So they're going to have a relief pitcher of the award, and there's been the Trevor Hoffman Award and the Mariano Rivera Award for each league, NL and AL. in the past. But those criteria were based so much on saves that it basically skewed other relief pitchers who might have been great, who didn't get save opportunities or have just the gaudy saves numbers that sort of make everybody go, ooh, which we know now that, getting 50 saves is not what it meant, 20 years ago.
Looking at innings pitched and then the effectiveness of those innings.
Right.
Because here's the thing. The chance of some guy pitching like 75 low leverage innings in like the 5th and 6th inning and them all being absolutely amazing, so his advanced stats are just incredible, is pretty low. Because guess what? If he's doing that, the team is going to notice and be like, maybe we should use him in harder situations, and then we're all going to be talking about the guy.
Well, and that's like a great point, right? Because, pitching in the highest leverage situations, we realize now, is not necessarily in the 9th inning. If you've got the heart, if you've got Turner, Harper, and Schwarber to face in an inning, you're thinking, okay, I think I want the guy to pitch in the 8th inning when those guys are batting instead of waiting for the 9th inning when they might be facing lower hitters in the lineup. Right.
Like let's be honest with ourselves. I think this idea that we need to defend this award against the idea that somebody unworthy could win it because, we don't have some kind of keystone stat to key in on. Like, without saves, what if it goes to some guy that wasn't actually that good? Because we hear about things like WAR and stuff where like somebody that maybe didn't have that great a season will show up with a weirdly high WAR just because the stats like him. Awards don't really work that way. Like Dendel Nunez was good last year, but nobody was going to mistakenly give him reliever of the year just because they looked at his numbers and they're like, wow, he was really impressive.
Had a nice year.
Right.
Right. That's what they say. And, Mariano Rivera is by far and away the greatest reliever in history. I don't really think there's a second place, in that race, sort of when you think about it. But I would say that one of the most unheralded relief pitchers in the Hall of Fame, and it's because not only did he get this 300 saves in his career, but he used to pitch 2 and 3 innings at a time. It's a long time ago. Do you know who I'm going to talk about?
I think
I have it for this guy. I'm probably going to write about him because I think he's.
If you're talking about who I think you're talking about, he's a tough guy to talk about in these.
Rich Gossage, Goose Gossage.
Oh, okay.
So Goose Gossage, had pitched 1,000 innings, but when at the time that he pitched, it was really before they closed the way they do today with 1 inning or only. He would pitch 3 innings, and it was like nothing for him to go out there and do that. It is, in retrospect now, that looks more impressive to me than it did when he was doing it, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for being as great as he was.
Well, speaking of great relievers, did you want to kind of get into our under talked about story of this week, our hidden gem, so to speak?
Yeah. So, it only surfaced, I guess, on Saturday that the Red Sox signed Aroldis Chapman at 37 years old to a 1-year deal beyond this year for a measly $13 million. Well,
because spoiler alert, if you haven't been paying attention to Aroldis Chapman in the Red Sox, he's been lights out good, people, like unbelievably effective.
So, yeah, he's got a whip of 0.67 this year.
Well, apparently
that's crazy.
They made a mechanical adjustment to him. They changed how he was throwing, and that's had a big adjustment. He was apparently where he was I think it's where he was landing.
He's a big guy. He's 6'6", I think.
And it's had a big effect on his
6'4".
ability to be effective and throw strikes consistently.
So
he can still throw the hell out of the ball.
And so that, to me, when they signed him for that 1 year, and he's only 37, and his fastball is back up to 100 miles an hour, this is a Hall of Fame pitcher. And we look at Kimbrel, right, as being, sort of above and Kenley Jansen because they have the 400 saves and whatnot, at least in terms of the pecking order.
Right. I think we're going to first say separating out Aroldis Chapman, the baseball player, from Aroldis Chapman, the human being. It's a difficult thing in all of these situations when you have
We're just talking about pitching.
Right,
here.
we're just talking about pitching. But I think it's just important to acknowledge that, like, look, yes, we're aware of that, but we're separating this out purely as the pitcher. The guy probably actually deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because we kind of are unfair to him in that we leave him out of the conversation when it comes to the Jansens and the Kimbrels of this era. For whatever reason, we don't mention Aroldis
because
Chapman.
He doesn't have 400 saves yet. And if you looked at his years after the pandemic season, he didn't have great save number years because he wasn't even used a lot of the times as the closer. So, and then all of a sudden this year he's back up to 29. He's throwing 100 miles an hour. And his like I said, his whip is crazy. He's pretty much unhittable, and there's no reason to think he can't do this for another few years, right? Another 2 or 3 seasons. So he'll get the 400 saves.
Right, because we can't act like pitchers throwing this hard late into their career is some kind of anomaly, because Nolan Ryan was doing this. He was throwing 95 plus when he was 40 years old. I'm pretty sure he could still throw 95 plus today.
Yeah, in batting practice or something like that.
Right.
So, and one of the things I think about Aroldis Chapman is when we talk about the Hall of Fame, he's got the highest K per 9 at 14.6 for his career.
And I think that is a stat
that's ridiculous.
You have to value more and more as you go along for relievers and especially for starters. Because if you have a starting pitcher that has a career K per 9 above like 10, you really have to think about how crazy dominant that guy is, because he's not throwing 9 innings a lot of the time, which means he's striking out. When he throws 6 innings, he's striking out like 10 guys a lot of the time.
And the other thing about the Hall of Fame is it's about being famous. Right? Aroldis Chapman came up as a kid and threw 104 miles an hour. From the very first time he stepped on a major league mound, it's like, whoa, we got a guy who's throwing 104 miles an hour. That's crazy. And he's a bit infamous, as you said as well. But I think that's what a Hall of Famer is, right? It's a guy who announced himself and managed to sustain that for an entire career. And pretty much he had some rough patches in his career. Chapman, he's done that.
Oh, he totally has done that. And when you look at the advanced stats past just the save numbers, he's every bit the reliever. It's just that because of his playoff meltdown specifically and some of his bad starts in playoff, bad appearances in the playoffs, you remember the bad Aroldis Chapman a lot more than the bad Craig Kimbrell or the bad Kenley Jansen. But I am sure Braves fans and Dodger fans could tell you all about the bad version of those two pitchers.
And it's certainly my position when it comes to the postseason play that can only help a guy's state. So I'm not going to ding him if he didn't do great in the playoffs. I mean that's a lot to expect of a guy over what is normally a fairly small sample compared to his career.
And it's also not fair to ding them for the playoffs, because it's just like, for the most part, most guys aren't there enough to do anything, and it's just like, okay, you made the playoffs, that's good enough for me. And if some other guy didn't make the playoffs, we're not dinging him for the lack of that, because like we were just talking about with Paul Skenes, if you do show franchise loyalty and you're punished for it, you shouldn't have your career be punished for that as well.
I'm sorry, you never pitched in the playoffs. We can't vote you in.
Right.
So, that's going to be something we're going to do every week. We're going to do the under the radar story of the week. But now let's get to the stat of the week and make sure. And I'll let you do that. Let's differentiate between when we talk about defense and we're going to talk about range factor. In episode 616, we did defensive metrics in general, and we covered all of them. The outs above average and the defensive zone ratings and all this stuff. Well, let's talk about just range factor and what it means.
Right. There's a couple different ways of tracking range factor, but range factor was originally a statistic that was developed by Bill James that measures how many plays a fielder makes in terms of putouts and assists relative to the number of innings played, so that we can get a better idea of their range rather than just fielding percentage, because fielding percentage just tells you really their ability to catch
caught
the
what
ball.
They got to.
Right.
Right. And so, and I think about range factor thinking, well, there are some guys that can have good range, and we've seen it watching Met games. It's like where the outfielder runs all the way to the ball, but doesn't catch it. So he had the range to get to the ball, but he didn't make the play.
A guy that I could think that had great range factor when he came on the scene a couple of years ago, or now a long time ago, about 10 years ago, was Juan Lagares. He came out in center field and City Field, and he could just run things.
He could make the play.
Right, he could make the play. So he had an unbelievable range factor. But the tricky thing about range factor, especially with outfielders, is when guys have a terrible range factor, you kind of don't notice, because the ball, it just seems like the guy got a hit.
Yeah. We talk about the Mets' Mark Vientos when he plays third base, and he's got one of the worst range factors in Major League Baseball. Right. And he's, obviously we know he's not fast and all that stuff, but it's more than that. It's the quick twitch, able to move quickly to get to your left or your right to make a play on the ball.
Because range factor is not going to measure how good you are at getting a jump on the ball, being able to recognize where it's going, being able to make a good break and accelerate to it. But it is going to measure that, because it's going to calculate whether or not you got to a ball. So it doesn't matter if you're necessarily the fastest fielder. You can make up for that with range factor by getting really good jumps and understanding good paths to the ball. You can make up with speed, but you got to catch the ball for your range factor to go up.
And Yankee fans will excuse when I bring up the guy you always think about in terms of range factor. He's in the Hall of Fame. There's shortstop Derek Jeter, who, defensive metrically actually didn't play out as well as you might have thought, mainly because, while he was good at all the balls he got to and made the play, there were a lot of balls he didn't get to that a lot of players did.
And you think about guys like that in the outfield right now. We could think of two of them in the National League East, in Castellanos and Soto, because you don't notice they catch the balls that are get to them. Sometimes Soto and Castellanos will even make a great throw, but you don't notice all the balls that were like that are a double that a different right fielder would have just gotten a good break on and caught.
Or in Saturday's game, Soto went back on a fly ball to right field, and it was a tough catch to make. He got all the way up there. He hit the ball, but he didn't catch it. So range-wise, he got to the ball, but he didn't make the play.
And there's a few other ways of measuring it. We've talked about them in the past with ultimate zone rating, or UZR, or defensive runs saved, DRS. They're different measures of tuning it a little bit deeper to get an idea of how good the individual fielder is.
It's right. I just trying to put into metrics. Okay, 60% of the outfielders get to that ball. And did he make that play? We'll give him 0.6 things because he made the play. And then if you don't make it, you adding up numbers. I'm not sure it always gives you. It just gives you the gross metrics of actually what happened after the play. You don't know actually what happened on the play.
Right. I think people generally, it seems like people like UZR a little more than DRS. They feel like it gives you a little bit more because it's covering in there factor to cover ground and arm strength, turn double plays, making errors. So there's a little bit more because it's looking at video-based data rather than because it's looking at where the ball is batted rather than just the observer judgment, because all those other statistics are just based off of the result of the play. This is looking at, okay, how reasonable was this guy to actually make this play? Because sometimes you see a ball, the ball's hit 118 miles an hour.
Nobody was making that play.
Nobody, and if they did make a play, it's a Gold Glove caliber defensive play that you can't expect the guy to make.
And it is a stat range factor that can be improved upon with work. I remember when Brandon Nimmo came up to the Mets and they moved him into center field, not necessarily a natural center fielder, and he worked his tush off to be a better defensive center fielder by understanding how to get the best jump he possibly could, where to position himself to make up for the fact that maybe he didn't quite have the range factor that other center fielders do.
He's an okay left fielder as a result of that. He's not a great defensive left fielder now. He's kind of fallen off a little bit because he was really good when he first moved over there. But he's still a solid enough outfielder considering who he's got else out there with him. Another person I could think with is Pujols. Pujols worked himself. He started at first because he started as a third baseman. He was not a good third baseman.
Couldn't play outfield.
So they moved him over to first base. And at the start, he wasn't great. And by the end, he was a very solid first baseman. I think he got some Gold Gloves. Gold Gloves are always tough to evaluate because sometimes they become a reputation kind of thing. But he was at least considered a solid fielder by the end of it, which shows you can work and improve on your defense.
Right.
But I think range factor is something that's really hard to improve because Mark Vientos can get better at gloving balls. He can get better judgment, but he's still just slow as hell, and it's not going to help him get to balls that he just physically can't get to. That's why Wilmer Flores could never be a great fielder.
And we look at the National League East, you look at the Mets and the Braves have Matt Olson, who's a Gold Glove quality first baseman. Just watching him play the position, you can tell he's got more range than Alonso does. He gets the balls. He makes the play as well as when he gets to the ball.
You do not have a heart attack every time he needs to throw the ball to the pitcher.
Well, that's not about range factor. That's not about range factor.
That happens still.
But that is still the thing. So, yeah, I think just, think about range factor as giving the fielder the best opportunity to make the play, but they still have to make the play after they get there.
Right, exactly. You still have to be able to physically make the play. And we've seen it in the postseason of the Yankees. Defense, it might not win a lot of regular season games, but it wins championships.
Sure, as you go up the funnel and you're playing with the very best teams, the little things mean even more.